Today we're going to talk about handles and proportion on your pottery pieces. With over 30 years of pottery experience and 25 years teaching, I bring you pottery tips, tutorials, and demos from my straw bale homestead in the Canadian countryside. Today I want to talk to you about handles on any pottery, and it can be a wheel thrown piece like this one, or it can be a hand built piece like this one. If you're hand building or you're wheel throwing, this applies. Proportion. I see so many mugs with handles that are not proportioned properly for the size of the mug. So shape is another thing to consider for your handles, but proportion is super important, and it is something that even a beginner can easily access. I'm going to show you how I get the proper proportion for handles on my mugs today because I'm making some mugs. And I always pull my handles right off of my mug now. If you're a beginner, I don't recommend that you pull handles right off of your pieces like I'm going to show you now. I suggest you make them separately, let them set up, and then attach them. But the reason I do pull the handles directly off the mugs is I find it gives them a really nice fluidity. Like the handle is growing right out of the mug instead of being stuck on. And if it's something you want to try, absolutely go ahead, but just be warned, it is trickier than it looks. And I have made thousands of handles separately before I started doing it this way. So up to you, but be warned that it's not easy. The first thing I'm going to mention is just placement. I find that's something that's not taken into account necessarily unless you're conscious of it. I like to have the handle starting right at the rim and then have them ending with a good amount of distance before the bottom of the piece. There's a couple reasons for this. One, the whole bottom needs to be left unglazed. So if your handle goes right to the base, the bottom of your handle is going to have to be left unglazed, which doesn't look the best. And then secondly, just so that you can get one or more fingers underneath the handle when you go to pick it up. So if that handle was right down at the base, I'm not going to get under that at all. So it makes it easier to hold, it makes it easier to pick up, and it allows it not to be near this unglazed area at the bottom. So the first thing is placement. Once you have figured out your placement, where you want it to start and where you want it to stop, you're going to score. I like this tool for it. This is a serrated rib. So I'm going to score right at the top and where I know it's going to attach at the base. Now, technically I should be slipping it too, but I know this clay really well. It has a lot of grog in it, which means that it has a lot of tooth in it already. And I know that just applying water over top of my scoring and dipping the handle into water as well is enough. I also have the top of the handle scored. And then I'm going to squish and wiggle them together and blend it on there. So this is where it begins. I know it's really well attached, but if it's not, I could just yank it right off of there. So I need to make sure I blend it in really well. One thing I recommend when you are attaching handles at any point, whether this stage or you're making them separately and sticking them on, is don't overwork these areas. You want to get them nice and smooth and blended, but you don't want it to be cat licked. I heard that term once and it's so fitting. You can just imagine like overworking an area, getting it to look all crazy. Less is more when you're blending handles on. I'm going to hold this so that my handle goes in the correct curve that I want it. So if I were to pull this handle like this or even straight out, it's going to look a little bit droopy. So I like to tip it up a little bit because I like a little bit of a curve first. So you need lots of water, and I like to rotate my handles back and forth because your hand is naturally going to curve in one direction or the other. So this eliminates any really lopsided handles being pulled off of the piece. You can see how much the handle grew too. So this is where proportion happens. We have the placement correct, now we need to figure out the proportion. So I see so many mugs with handles like this. Not only does it look out of proportion and a bit ridiculous, when you're holding a mug way out from the body of the piece, it actually feels very unstable. So it's not a nice feeling when you have a handle that's huge. And then there's other times when the handles are way too small. Again, it looks silly and you can't properly fit your fingers in without brushing up against the cup, which will be hot, maybe. So when you're making a handle, you want to find that sweet spot when you're putting it on. And you will be able to do that by holding it up at eye level and playing with it. So too big, too big, too big, too big. Oh, that looks right. And then it goes too small, too small, too small. So you want to find that spot at which it looks just right for the rest of the piece. And I just kind of give it a little squish on there to tack it on. And I will cut off the tail with the edge of my serrated rib. Let that drop. And that is the right proportion for that mug. Now, every single piece you make is going to be different. So you have to do this every single time. You hold it up, figure out the right sweet spot, and then chop off the extra. So here I just do a simple little blend at the bottom. I don't score the inside of these the base of the handle. I just don't find it's necessary. I did score the cup where it attaches, and then it just seems okay. I do like to make it extra secure by dipping my thumb in water and leaving a little thumbprint, little button there that really attaches it properly. And also it looks super cute. Now, if you're at this point and you don't like the shape of your handle for any reason, you can absolutely change it. So you can give it a little push up. I kind of like that a little bit better. It's subtle, but it makes it nicer. If you find that your handle does not stay in the position that you're trying to get it to be in, if it's drooping down and it won't stay up, you can absolutely put your cup upside down and allow it to dry that way. And if your handle is raised up higher than your rim, you just want to put it on the edge of a table or a board so that it has the room to hang down. So I hope you found those tips helpful and will go forth into the world now with properly proportioned handles. I'm now going to turn it over to my throwing process, where I will give you some tips and tricks throughout that of how I actually threw these and trimmed them and got them ready for the handle stage. And at the end of the video, I will reappear and talk to you a little bit about some of the other projects I'm working on, as well as some book recommendations. I make all my own clothes and I'm always working on that as well. So if you're a sewer as well, you might find some inspiration there. And if you like literature and reading aloud to children and also for yourself, then please stay tuned for that as well. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the video. Clay won't stick to a wet wheel head, so always apply your water after you've stuck the clay down. Once your base is open, make sure you take your sponge and clean it up. Now is the best time to do that before recentering your piece and bringing up your walls. You want to make sure you're constantly drizzling water on your piece and that there's no friction at any point during your throwing process. Remove any water that's pooling inside your piece. I love the metal rib tool for shaping. I know it can be an intimidating tool, but with a lot of practice, it's absolutely the best tool for any shaping. When your piece is finished, make sure you take all of the standing water out from inside and run the sponge up alongside the inside of the wall. You also want to give special care and attention to your rim to make sure that it's smooth and round, as it will be touching your gentle, delicate lips. Pour water all the way around your piece. Wrap your wire tool really tightly, making sure you have a really taut wire before you slide it underneath your piece to cut it off. When sliding your piece off the wheel, you never want to push it from the side wall. You only want to push directly from the base. It's normal for your piece to become slightly misshapen as you slide it off and pick it up. That can all be adjusted later, so don't worry about that at this stage. Set it down gently, taking your time so you don't jolt it. When the piece is leather hard, you can begin your trimming process of removing all the extra clay from around the base. You can also trim a foot ring in the bottom if you'd like, but it's not necessary. You can just have your bases be flat. Make sure you're ready to catch them at any moment, Pieces can fly off the wheel and you need to have cat-like reflexes. Just place the piece back on and keep going. I like to use a little stamp for the bottom of my pieces. I got this one on Etsy and it was very inexpensive. It's simple and sweet. When I'm making a lot of pieces, I set up a little bit of an assembly line. So I make all my handles and score them and score all the cups and get everything ready so that I can just attach one after the other. I like to flatten my handles and get them ready to attach at this stage so that they're almost the shape that I need them when they're completely finished. Using a metal serrated rib, I score both the edge of the handle and the attachment points on the cup. I then dip the handle in water and wiggle and squish it on there before I blend with my fingers and make sure that the handle is really well attached to the piece. At this point, I am ready to start pulling my handle directly off my cup. I make sure that the proportions are just where I want them. Always hold it up at eye level to double check and then trim off any extra. I blend in the bottom of the handle and then I add a little thumbprint to reinforce the attachment and also add some decorative element. If there's any little creases that you need to get into, you can clean them up with a wet paintbrush. And there you have a cozy and well-proportioned mug. Besides making the mugs this week, I'm also working on joggers for my boys. I thought I was going to get to do some more things for myself, but alas, this came up and I will hopefully get to make myself something soon. These are the joggers by Lowland Kids, and they are the one and only pattern that I use for the boys' pants. And I have a couple more in the works here. These are cut out but not yet sewn. Look at those colors, aren't they beautiful? I have a kind of a heathered cream one here. I think it's called heathered almond or something like that. These are all from Blackbird Fabrics, I believe. And then there's this sort of taupey one, and then a heathered brown. And I just think that's so lovely. I think so many kids' clothes that you can find in the stores are just so loud and clashy, and it's so restful for my eyes to see the kids dressed in these beautiful kind of subtle earth tones. And because I make my own clothes, I get to choose that. Also, you can make it to fit your child. My kids tend to be a little long and skinny, so things like leggings and pants like this, I can go down a size and then just lengthen the legs, and that way they're not baggy or fitting on them in a funny way. If you've seen some of my other videos, you may also know that we homeschool our kids, and I'm an avid reader. I love reading out loud to them, and I think good quality literature is so extremely important to their development and also my enjoyment of reading to them. And there's so much literature out there for kids that's just not good quality. And I thought I would share with you the books that we read and also give little reviews on them. The past couple of weeks we have read this one, The Undead Fox of Deadwood Forest. We really liked this one. It's lovely, it's fantasy, and it tells the tale of a fox who is an usher for the underworld, which also reminds me of another book that we had read called The House with Chicken Legs, which is a similar theme in which one of the main characters is ushering souls to the afterlife. And I think it's so beautiful to talk to children about death and dying, and that it's just a fact of life. Now, living out in the country and with all of the animals and wildlife, they have had their fair exposure to death. In fact, when I went to go see the chickens this morning, there was a dead chicken on the floor. We have 24 chickens, so now we have 23. So that's something that they're exposed to in a real way, and I think that it's very healthy for them to see that. So I know that especially growing up in the city like I didn't get a lot of exposure to that, but out in the countryside, it's a part of life. It's just the way it is. And if we can see the beauty in the cycle of living and dying and help our children realize that too. Of course, it's not going to necessarily lessen the grief when somebody close to you dies, but it at least gives you a foundation for talking about it and knowing how to deal with it. This book, A Night Divided, we just finished reading, and this one I would say is geared to a little bit older of an audience, although my 6-year-old was listening to it and he liked it. I don't think he kind of understood everything that was going on, but he was quite involved in this story. This is, as you can tell by the cover, it's a little bit more serious. This is a historical fiction account of a family that gets divided when the wall goes up in Berlin during the Cold War. So highly educational, really, really good values and family in this, lots of love, also very difficult time. So I actually didn't remember learning too much about the Cold War. I was aware of the Berlin Wall. I was born in 1980, so I kind of remember it coming down, but it wasn't really talked about too much from what I remember in school. So this was a really lovely way to learn more about what the Cold War was and what life was like for people on either side of the wall. I have to say the first few chapters were a bit dour and I wasn't sure I wanted to continue, but my daughter really wanted to keep reading to learn more about the Berlin Wall. And I'm really glad that we stuck with it because it ended up being really, really beautiful. It is a tense read. There are some subject matters in it that are difficult, so use your discretion. Nothing graphic, but there are some references to some things that happen obviously in that kind of time frame and in that kind of environment that you may or may not want to expose your kids to, depending on what you're comfortable with. The last book I wanted to recommend is this one. I have read her first book as well, and this one was lent to me by somebody that I teach pottery to. So thank you if you're watching, Rochelle, and I love this book very, very much. This is a really good follow-up to Lindsay Gibson's book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And it gives some really beautiful insights on different personalities that you may come across, that something doesn't feel right, you're not sure what's going on. It kind of goes through the psychology of what some people might be making you feel and why and how to handle it. So I love this book a lot. I found it very helpful and I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for your time today. It was my pleasure to be here with you and share these little tidbits about pottery and other things in life. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a wonderful rest of your day, night, wherever you are. All my love. See you soon. Mwah.